over the years, history has certainly shown that imports can absolutely kill a domestic market regardless of the industry. And for this reason alone, the American Sheep Industry Association now has been considering a possible trade case against lamb importing countries. Joining us now is ASI President Brad Boner out of Wyoming. And Brad, thank you for being with us. And I guess first thing out of the chute, why don't you give us the latest on this possible trade case?
Yeah, so since the early part of May, at the request of some of our membership, ASI retained a trade law firm that resides in Washington, D.C., and began a preliminary investigation into the our ability to bring a trade case against Australia and New Zealand. In particular, in 2022, 2021, and 2022, imports grew by leaps and bounds. And so we thought it was time to look at this, and our members thought it was time to look at it. So we began that process in May. We just got their memo late last week. Our executive board met yesterday and reviewed the findings of the preliminary investigation and interviewed the law firm as well. And it was agreed to by the executive board that we would not go forward at this time with a trade case against Australia and New Zealand. In the memo and in the interview with our law firm, they felt confident that we could prove that we were injured, especially at the initial level. Would be slightly tougher at the second level, but they were confident, relatively confident we could do that. But unfortunately, there are two things that have to happen in a trade case. Not only do you have to prove injury, but in a case of anti-dumping or countervailing, you have to prove that they're selling their product for cheaper here than they're selling it for in the home country, or that they are subsidizing their producers. There was no evidence found of subsidies in Australia or New Zealand to their producers. And the dumping margins that they found after investigating prices that they're selling the product here versus prices that they're getting for their product in Australia were negative to a maximum of 1% to 2%. So going forward, what we would have done if we would have gone forward, we went to ITC, International Trade Commission, and done the injury case. Potentially, they would have agreed that we were injured. We would have then had to go to the Department of Commerce, and they would have done their own investigation. We would have had to do more in detailed surveys to the producer membership and received a good response. And then they would have determined what, if any dumping happened at all, what the margins were. And our investigation showed that it was unlikely that we were going to find any dumping margins at all. Most of them were negative. Best case scenario, but it would have been 1% to 2%. So what that means is we would have had a 1% to 2% tariff at best case scenario, and in a industry that currently the domestic product is 30% above, the Australia New Zealand product. That probably would have had little impact on how much lamb they brought into this country.
Well, absolutely, Brad. And it sounds like ASI has certainly done its due diligence, which I'm sure the entire industry and your membership fully appreciates. And even though the decision has been made not to pursue a trade case, we still need to visit about the seriousness of these imports to domestic sheep producers like yourself, because they are hurting our domestic market.
Yeah, there's no doubt that that's happening. I guess the frustrating part and the world we live in, we got to live by the trade laws, and either that or go to Congress and ask Congress to do something. And how that would probably play out is congressional action would, even if they wanted to, Australia and New Zealand would threaten to retaliate. Australia in particular is we are net positive with them on trade balance, so we export more goods to them than they do. So I mean, it's just a huge uphill battle, and at the moment, very limited opportunities to fix it. Going forward, we will continue to look at this and watch it. There are opportunities going forward. The COVID piece of this, which I can explain a little bit later, played into it. And so, I think we'll continue to keep our eye on this rabbit and see where it goes.
Yeah, for sure. We should also talk about the fact that the domestic sheep industry lost a lot of its packing capacity during that COVID pandemic, followed by multiple years of severe drought, especially out here in the West, which a lot of domestic sheep are raised on, which truly only amplified the seriousness of these imports on our domestic lamb prices. Am I correct?
Yeah, and what we've seen in 2023 so far is a 16% reduction in the pounds of imports that have come in year over year from the first half of 2022 to the first half of 2023. And so they are reducing now. They do follow the market as our cutout went down and their margins got lower. They imported less lamb here, and so they're a creature of the market as well, just like we are. And as market conditions change, there's a lag there, but they respond to the market as well, just like everybody else does.
Now, Brad, even though the American Sheep Industry Association's executive board and board of directors has decided not to pursue a trade case for the obvious reasons we've been talking about today on those lamb importing countries, we can't forget to mention that the industry is getting some legislative help from Western members of Congress, like Wyoming Senator John Barrasso, Wyoming Senator Cynthia Lummis, North Dakota Senators Kevin Kramer and John Hoeven, as well as South Dakota Senator Mike Rounds. How important is it to have this type of support from these Western members of Congress, which I would have to think that more members from Western Ag Network country are going to sign on to this important issue?
Yeah, we would hope so. And the importance is can't be overstated. It's huge, and we're lucky in Wyoming with our congressional delegation to have tremendous support for our industry, and many of the Western states are in a similar position. But this in 2022, the Biden administration published a final rule that would allow imports from the UK, Canada, and Mexico. And all we're asking them to do is do a stop and study. It's been 20 years since they've looked at the consequences and possible disease outbreaks that could come from these importations. And we're just asking the USDA to do a 1-year stop and study and to look at all these things and let's get some real-time information here so we can make sure we're making a good decision.
Well, I think it's the least that the administration, whether it's this one or whatever happens next year during the election, can do. I mean, this country, you know it as well as anybody else, and I've been to a lot of ASI conventions and in my nearly 30 years of being in farm broadcasting to know scrapie eradication has been one of ASI's top priorities for as long as I can remember, and rightfully so, not just to keep our domestic sheep flock healthy, but also to keep our consumers safe. And so it's the least this administration can do and future administrations to do and to ask of other importing countries, right?
Yeah, I think that's the big ask here is that we've asked multiple administrations do actually going backwards is that if they're going to bring in new imports, we want access to those markets as well. We don't have access to Australia and New Zealand's market. They aren't going to give us access. These other countries, we want access to those markets and fair trade with those people and with no barriers. And that's the least they can do, in my opinion.
Well, and just to kind of wrap things up, Brad, these imports, along with a lot of other important industry issues, will certainly be discussed at the upcoming ASI annual convention in January, which is headed for Denver. Why don't you talk a little bit about that and set the tone for the 2024 ASI convention?
Yeah, I just real quick like to invite everybody to come to Denver the January 10th through the 13th. We're kind of right in the middle of stock show there, so you can kill a lot of birds with one stone there, and we'll be talking about a lot of these issues that are impactful to the United American lamb industry, American sheep industry, and we'd just like everybody to come, and we'd love to see you in Denver.
Well, again, our thanks to ASI President Brad Boner out of Wyoming for joining us. And for more information about the trade case, imports, the upcoming convention, and anything more that's related to our U.S. sheep industry, you can visit the American Sheep Industry Association's website at sheepusa.org.